We're going to do some old-fashioned ghost town hunting today in southern Kansas and Sumner County. So I live in Wichita, Kansas, and so Sumner County is the county to the south. And we're going to go check out, a few ghost towns. We'll see how many we end up finding. We're going to start in Milan, and we're going to end in Rome. So a little Italian theme today, but I don't think all of the towns are going to be named after cities in Italy. But we'll head south about 45 minutes or so and check out Milan and see where we go from there. Starting our journey here in Milan, which actually is probably called Milan by the locals here. Like to Americanize those foreign words. But this is actually an incorporated town. And you might wonder, why is an incorporated town in a ghost town video? I did a whole video, me and my buddy Kurt, we talked about the definition of a ghost town. So if you're not sure why, you might want to watch that video. There's lots of definitions for ghost towns, and we're going to consider this one for today, even though technically there were 56 people living here in the 2020 census. But when you explore around, you'll definitely get some ghostly feelings, some feelings of kind of abandoned houses and buildings. And walking into downtown here, I'm just noticing how this concrete beneath me was probably part of something more significant. So yeah, let's explore around and learn more about Milan. Post office was established in 1875, about 3/4 of a mile southwest of town here. It was named after Milan in Italy. The town was built mainly in 1879 in anticipation of the arrival of the Kansas City, Lawrence, and Southern Kansas Railroad. Before the town was laid out, there was a district school 1 mile west known as Haytop. The school moved here in 1879. In 1880, the post office was also moved here. Population peaked in 1910 at 240, and at that time it was on the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad. Had a bank, a mill, grain elevator, several stores, telegraph and express offices, and a money order post office with 2 rural routes. The high school was closed through consolidation in 1959, and the post office stayed open until 2011. Like I said, it's still an incorporated town, and the population kind of hung on until about 2000, but has really dropped off ever since, down to its lowest total ever at 56 in 2020. Gone from Italy to Australia. Now we're in Perth, but no, we're actually only like 11 miles away from Milan here. And Perth, Kansas is an unincorporated community. Standing here by the railroad because this was what this town was all about and built on, and obviously the railroad doesn't stop here anymore. And once that happens, a lot of towns like this no longer are as important as they used to be. And Milan was about a mile off a pretty good main road, but here in Perth we're several miles away from any kind of highly trafficked area, so just no businesses or anything left. So let's learn more about the history of Perth and show you what's left of the town. In 1878, 16-year-old Katie McEachin from Canada purchased 360 acres in the area. In 1879, she sold her land to Alan Spear, and in 1881, he platted the town site. Post office was established in 1882, and the first business was a grocery store measuring 16 by 30 feet.
The first train of the Chicago, Kansas, and Nebraska Railroad reached Wellington in 1887. From there, it was built through Perth in 1888. Perth became a shipping point for livestock. 1910, Perth was on both the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad and the Chicago, Rock Island, and Pacific Railroad. At that time, it had a bank, 2 milling companies, several retail establishments, express and telegraph offices, and a money order post office with one rural route and a population of 150. Perth continued to grow. Population was as high as 400 in the 19-teens, but its remote location and school consolidation eventually led to its downfall, and the post office closed in 1954.
We dropped down a few miles to Corbin, and this is along the same railroad we were just in Perth. And in fact, if you look how the railroad goes, it's probably between 3 and 4 miles between Corbin and Perth along the railroad. And that would have been about how far a lot of those stops were back in the day. They would be about 3-4 miles apart. And so they just stopped here, they just stopped at the next one, and would have been an important place to load up your product and get it to the bigger city. And when that stopped happening, then places like Corbin here were not needed. And you can see kind of some old buildings here on Main Street. So let's talk a little bit about the history of Corbin and see what they got left.
Corbin was founded by a colony from Missouri which purchased 80 acres of land in the area. Before the colony arrived, a post office was established at nearby Hearst Crossing in 1878. When the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad ran southwest of that area, the post office moved closer to the railroad, and its name was shortened to just Hearst in 1881. A new post office was established in 1884. It changed its name to Corbin. In 1887, the Chicago, Kansas, and Nebraska Railroad built a branch line north-south from Harrington through Corbin to Caldwell. In the early 1890s, an employee hung the afternoon mail sack on a pole at the Rock Island Depot, and an employee on the train grabbed it from the pole with a hook as it was traveling at high speed. By 1910, like Perth, Corbin was stationed on both railroads and had a population of around 170. Many churches have played a role in the settlement of the community through the years. By the mid-1930s, many of the outlying rural schools had consolidated into Corbin. The post office was discontinued in 1974, and schools eventually consolidated into Caldwell.
And down another railroad to the ghost town of Drury. Now this is a ghost town, and certainly some interesting old buildings as you're driving through town checking out. But coming over here by the railroad, and that's obviously why it grew, and like some of these other towns, why it's basically disappearing. There's a couple houses in the area, but still got some of the old original buildings from probably 100 years ago, and cool town to walk around and check out.
Drury was started when the Drury Dam and Mill was built in 1883 on the natural flat rock shelf in the Chikaskee River. Built by the town's founder Alexander Culbertson, the town and mill were named for his wife. Post office was established in 1887. Drury was a station on the Kansas Southwestern Railroad, and by 1910 was a shipping point with a population of only 28. After Meridian Road, which is now Highway 81, was established from Wichita to Caldwell through Drury in 1912, the village became a playground for city folks who wanted to take an afternoon's drive or a weekend holiday. Many stayed in the 3-story, 46-room Drury hotel, enjoyed a boat ride on the river, swam, fished, drank at the saloon, danced at the pavilion, and watched movies projected onto a screen on a raft in the river. The resort also had a bathhouse. Despite tourism, the town itself did not grow. Post office closed in 1921. In 1923, the town was devastated when heavy rains caused the river to rise, flooding the town and destroying many of the buildings, as well as the bridge across the river, as it rose as high as 21 feet. The hotel floated off its cement foundation walls, rolled over on its side, broke into pieces, and floated down the river.
As we pull up to our next town here, Hunnewell, they have a nice historical marker to check out, and talks about the history of the town. Also, on the other side of it, it talks about the real Cherokee Strip and how the term Cherokee Strip and Cherokee Outlet get kind of mixed up with each other. And it gives the kind of rationale for why one was called a strip and one is the outlet. So I didn't know that either. We are literally just barely down the road from Oklahoma. So obviously this was an important place as people were getting ready to go over there and claim land in Oklahoma when that was opened up. So certainly there would have been a lot of people here. Not that many people here anymore. Still an incorporated town. And we'll go in and check it out.
In 1880, the Sumner County Railway Company was chartered and built a line that completed to Hunnewell. The town was named after Boston financier and railroad owner H.H. Hunnewell. Several buildings sprung up within days of the railroad arriving, and a stockyard was built. Over the following months, the town grew quickly. Later in 1880, a post office and a school was started. Typical of cow towns of the era, the business district consisted of one hotel, a couple of dance halls, and 9 saloons. Also typical of that time was violence, and it was not uncommon to see gunfights in Hunnewell. In 1889, more than 1,500 loads of cattle were shipped out of town. By 1890, the population was around 170. When the Cherokee Outlet was opened in 1893, a registration booth was set up, and approximately 15,000 people gathered to make the run. Population began to dwindle as more railroad lines went to Oklahoma and Texas, and the cattle trade declined. Post office closed in 1960. Population peaked at 233 in 1900, as you can see, and held steady through the Great Depression and then started to dwindle, and the 44 today is its lowest ever.
Well, we made it around to Rome. Welcome to Rome, Kansas. Now there's actually a couple of Romes. There's another Rome up in Ellis County, and then there's one here in Sumner. And it's had a post office for a few decades, but not much of a significant community. You can see a few things. There's obviously the railroad here, and there's it's still active elevator and business, and then there's an old building and a couple houses, and then some houses kind of abandoned in the trees. But that's about it here in Rome.
Rome has always been a small community here in Sumner County. It's located on the Hutchinson, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad. We're 8 miles south of the county seat of Wellington. Post office was opened in 1874 and remained open until 1933. In 1910, the population was 82.
This was a fun day exploring around Sumner County and just kind of randomly picking some places that looked interesting, and I'd say most of them were very interesting. So I hope you enjoyed exploring some ghost towns in Sumner County, Kansas. Now that you made it to the end of that video, let let me tell you about some of the extras on the channel. One of the things you can do is become a member. There are 3 levels of support. There's supporter, producer, and executive producer levels. All 3 have different levels of fun incentives and perks. If you haven't done so, please check out travelwiththewiseguy.com. There are lots of extras on there to explore. One of them is merchandise. We have Travel with the Wise Guy coffee mugs, Death Go Round t-shirts, hoodies, hats, and all sorts of fun things to show your support of this channel. Also on the website is a custom Google map. I've dropped pins in every place I've visited and linked the episode to each location. This seems to be a very popular feature for many of you. Also, sign up for my free newsletter that goes out about once a month. There are all sorts of links and tidbits on this page, old videos, podcasts, and just about everything I can think of I throw on the website. For all that information and more, go to travelwiththewiseguy.com. And now, the reason you're probably here, the outtakes. I see a couple of death go rounds here in Milan. Let's check out this one. Oh, wow. It'll swing and spin. I love that. Kind of a wild ride if you get the thing going. We're gonna give that an 8. This one's a little smaller, but still classic. Heavier, doesn't spin as well. Not gonna have as much fun on that one. I do like the design, but that's gonna get a, we're gonna go 6.5. But man, there is all kinds of old school playground equipment in here. Nice. What's up? How you doing, buddy? Oh! I have a feeling this one's not gonna be a real good spinner. Well, it kind of wants to. Well, missing a piece right there. The whole place is mowed except right there. We need to mow that up. Probably could give it a decent score then, but we're gonna give it a 5. Has potential to maybe be a 7 if it had the grass cut. How you doing? You the sheriff of Hunnewell? I wouldn't mess with you. Okay, off to patrol.